I'm Cassidy Rhodes, a data strategy consultant based in Portland. My job is to dissect complex business problems and convert chaotic information into predictable, profitable outcomes. I specialize in finding the hidden leverage points, the overlooked vulnerabilities in any system. And today, the system I was dissecting was my own family. Carla, my mother and a chief property executive at a high-end investment fund, stood rigid in the center of my minimal, high-tech apartment. Her arms were crossed, her posture speaking volumes about her displeasure, and her tone was glacially calm as she delivered the verdict. She said, "Cassidy, I'm telling you this as gently as possible. You are uninvited to Veronica's engagement weekend in Malibu. It's a meticulously curated event, and your particular brand of analytical honesty is simply too disruptive to the aesthetic we are trying to project." I slowly set my half-empty ceramic mug onto the stainless steel counter, focusing on the ring it left, and I looked her straight in the eye as I analyzed her statement. I asked her, "You think my personality is going to ruin the aesthetic? Or are you actually worried that I might inadvertently analyze the profitability of Veronica and Darian's union and find it deeply flawed? Perhaps exposing some of Darian's alleged offshore accounting or your recent, shall we say, strategic debt consolidation?" Carla visibly flinched but quickly regained her composure, claiming it was about maintaining peace and sophistication for Veronica, the international landscape architect who was the family's golden child. Carla scoffed and said, "This isn't about data, Cassidy. It's about being able to control a room. And you have proven repeatedly you cannot control your compulsion to call out hypocrisy, which is why you can't be trusted at an event designed for image preservation." The familiar condescension dripped from every word. Yet I felt nothing but cold, clear logic forming in my mind. I simply nodded once and replied, "I understand completely. Mom, you want zero risk, zero unpredictability, and zero truth present at a $200,000 engagement party designed for magazine spreads." Carla shifted, expecting the usual outburst or tears that would justify her exclusion. But instead, I smiled a small, genuine smile and said, "You should know that your timing is actually impeccable, because I've just accepted a massive, time-sensitive consulting gig that requires my absolute focus this weekend." I told her it was a high-value, high-risk contract, and I couldn't have made it to California anyway. My mother's shock was immediate and palpable, as she realized her act of exclusion had only served to validate my professional significance and, worse, had now freed up my schedule to engage in work that was undoubtedly more meaningful than her perfect social performance. I left my mother to process her confusion and immediately shifted into execution mode. My family believed that by excluding me, they had achieved complete control over their narrative. But they forgot one fundamental principle of data strategy. An abandoned data point often becomes the most valuable one, freed from the constraints of the main system. My hurt wasn't emotional, it was purely analytical, a flawed variable that needed immediate correction. I wasn't going to wallow. I was going to generate superior content. I met Chloe Vance, my friend and an investigative photojournalist, at a bar specializing in industrial chic raw concrete floors and curated minimalist lighting, the opposite of Veronica's over-the-top glamour. Chloe slammed her phone down onto the polished wood table and said, "I cannot believe they excluded you. Your own mother calling you a liability. It's disgusting. Cassidy, you should sue them for emotional distress." I sipped my rye whiskey slowly, watching the ice melt, and replied, "Emotional distress is low ROI. I prefer a strategic pivot." I told her the exclusion was a gift. It meant I could prioritize the work that actually mattered. Chloe immediately brightened, remembering why she had called. She said, "I have the exact contract you need. A high-stakes, last-minute booking that demands your expertise." She then told me about her new clients, Jasmine and Julian, who were founders of a groundbreaking innovation education platform. They were getting married this weekend at the historic astronomical center on the hilltop, not a lavish resort, but a place symbolizing clarity and vision. Chloe explained that the couple's entire philosophy was built on transparency, and they intended to treat their wedding as a transparency event. Live streaming the entire process and publicly disclosing their total budget, $12,000. They specifically hired Chloe because they wanted raw, journalistic truth, not polished, airbrushed fiction. And they were looking for a content strategist to manage the inevitable social media friction. Chloe looked at me intently and said, "They want to disrupt the traditional wedding model. And I think they need your ruthlessness to make it happen." I immediately recognized the golden opportunity. This wasn't just a job. It was the perfect ethical and financial counter-narrative to my family's performance in Malibu. I laid out the core strategy on a napkin, drawing flowcharts and arrows. I told Chloe, the $200,000 engagement party is built on opulence, secrecy, and image debt. But the $12,000 wedding is built on honest numbers and authentic commitment. I explained that this is the classic data war, polished pretense versus verifiable transparency. And the market is hungry for transparency right now. I said we won't just photograph a wedding. We will use their event to create a national debate on financial ethics and relational values. Chloe was immediately on board, her photojournalist instincts lighting up. She asked me, "So you'll be my director of content strategy, driving the viral narrative?" I looked at her, my professional coldness fully engaged, and replied, "I'll be the one providing the strategic leverage, ensuring that every single post we make is an ethical counterpoint to the hollow perfection my family is currently simulating." I already knew the exact hashtag I needed to create something that would be the polar opposite of Veronica's perfectly manicured, aspirational tag. The exclusion had given me the clarity and the moral high ground I needed to launch a campaign that was not just about a wedding, but about truth in data and life. I spent the next 48 hours submerged in strategic analysis, not planning a wedding, but planning a data release. My family thought my only weapon was my sharp tongue. They forgot I was fluent in the global language of metrics and verifiable facts. I knew that for our content to go viral, it needed context. And that context had to directly expose the moral deficiency of Veronica's perfect facade. I needed to find the flaw in their system. My first act was a calculated breach of privacy, a necessary step in forensic discovery. Weeks ago, I had set up Carla's old personal archiving system for her, ostensibly for security. But the real benefit was the backdoor access it provided. I navigated the disorganized cloud files, past years of sanitized family photos and fake gratitude emails, until I hit the archived communications from the initial planning stages of Veronica's engagement. The data wasn't pretty. I uncovered text chains where Veronica expressed extreme stress about Darian's controlling demands and the astronomical cost overruns, followed by desperate messages to Carla about funding deficits. More critically, buried in a seemingly innocuous thread about Darian's business trip itinerary, I found deeply suggestive exchanges, subtle but undeniable hints of an ongoing affair, all of which Carla had seen and diligently ignored. I didn't need to expose everything. I just needed the data points that proved their foundation was rotten. On Saturday afternoon, as the sun hit the historic observatory just right, Chloe and I prepared for the transparency event. Jasmine and Julian were radiant, their happiness unscripted and authentic, focusing purely on their vows rather than the $12,000 budget they were openly sharing with their audience. I directed Chloe to focus her lens on the raw moments, Julian tearing up, Jasmine's unpolished, genuine laugh, the antithesis of the stiff, staged perfection Veronica would be enforcing in Malibu. The moment the couple exchanged vows, committing to transparency in their relationship and their business venture, I launched the initial wave of content. I pushed the first set of images onto our carefully cultivated channels, accompanying them with a razor-sharp caption that served as both a celebration and a strategic strike. I wrote $12,000. 100% transparency. 0% pretense. The only perfect thing about a wedding should be the commitment, not the budget. Within the hour, the engagement exploded. Not just with likes, but with comments arguing the ethics of modern weddings, exactly the binary friction I had targeted. Then the calls started. My phone, which had been silent for days, began vibrating relentlessly, showing Carla's name. I ignored the first three and finally answered the fourth, keeping my voice cool and detached. Carla immediately demanded I take down the posts, her voice tight with panic. She said, "Cassidy, this is actively undermining Veronica's event. People are making comparisons, and it's embarrassing for the entire family brand." I replied calmly that I was contractually obligated to provide high-quality, authentic content that resonated with the market. And right now, honesty was outperforming their fabricated spectacle. I told her the data doesn't lie, Mom, and the market is clearly rejecting the $200,000 facade. She desperately tried to appeal to family loyalty, but I cut her off. I told her, "You already withdrew my loyalty card when you decided I was too much of a liability to include. So right now, I'm just a consultant operating within my scope." I ended the call, knowing the viral data had already done its job. The foundation of their carefully constructed image had just been hit by an earthquake of public comparison, and I hadn't even unleashed the real poison yet. The content went past viral and became a full-blown media event, hitting 500K views within 3 hours. My strategy had worked flawlessly. The transparent $12,000 wedding was now the ethical yardstick against which all high-cost, high-secrecy events were being measured. Technology blogs and financial commentators were openly comparing the return on investment of Julian and Jasmine's integrity to the dubious expenses of Veronica's party, driving the narrative precisely where I wanted it. I watched the real-time data feeds, feeling a cold, clinical satisfaction. I wasn't dealing in emotion. I was dealing in market correction. I knew the initial comparison was only phase 1. The real escalation required leveraging the private data I had extracted, using an untraceable ghost account I had established years ago for threat modeling exercises. I published a single, highly truncated piece of text from Darian's archived messages. The text snippet was vague, a reference to a red room key and an expense anomaly, but when placed under a widely shared article questioning the financial ethics of Veronica's event, it became highly toxic. The caption I attached to the leak was blunt and lethal. "You can buy a $200,000 party, but you can't buy fidelity. Data supports this." The effect was instantaneous chaos within my family's social sphere. The sophisticated facade cracked, exposing the frantic, panicked core beneath. I received a stream of frantic texts from my cousin Veronica, the international landscape architect, which I ignored until she switched to a direct, private number call. I answered, hearing the screech of tires and the roar of a crowd in the background of her frantic voice. She bypassed all pleasantries and yelled, "You are actively sabotaging me. Cassidy, do you understand what you've done? You little analyst." I replied calmly, "I've provided market-relevant data." "Veronica, you've merely structured your life as a high-risk liability." She screamed, demanding to know what I wanted, offering money or influence to delete the posts. I told her I want acknowledgement that the perfection you all worship is a measurable lie. And I want you to admit you excluded me because I was the only variable that could expose it. Veronica quickly pivoted from desperation to aggression, saying, "I should have known you'd pull some cold-blooded stunt like this. You've always been jealous of my success and my life." I pushed back, my voice low and dangerous. "I am a data strategist, Veronica. I'm incapable of feeling jealousy for a system that is mathematically failing." I told her I was analyzing the data point on Darian's affair. "And it seems you were too busy worrying about the floral arrangements to calculate the risk inherent in your fiancé." Family chaos intensified. Carla called again. Less panicked about the content and more frantic about the exposure of Darian's infidelity, not because she cared about Veronica, but because Darian was tied to a major real estate contract Carla was desperate to secure. Carla said, "You have ruined the family's integrity. You need to understand how much money is at stake." I replied with a finality that brooked no argument. "You forfeited my obligation to family integrity when you decided I was disposable. I am now an external consultant, and you have no retainer with me." Veronica, driven by rage, retaliated by leveraging her professional network to try and blacklist Chloe and me from high-end corporate events, claiming we were untrustworthy saboteurs. I tracked her attempts in real time. I told Chloe, "Veronica is attempting to cut off our supply chain." But she failed to factor in the sheer volume of new leads generated by the viral traffic. Her influence is localized. Our content is global. I explained to Chloe that Veronica's attack was weak and predictable, born of emotion, while our defense was built on superior network analysis and market demand. The data proved that for every door Veronica tried to close, 3 more were opening, confirming that authenticity and competence were far more powerful currencies than inherited social status. The viral success was now a certified case study, one that leveraged ethical dissonance to generate measurable, high-value engagement. My phone rang, not with a frantic family member, but with the CEO of a major tech firm offering me the creative director position for their social media division. The offer was non-negotiable and came with a salary that dwarfed my previous income, a direct testament to the quantifiable return on investment of my ruthless honesty. I told the CEO that my strategy is simple. I convert chaotic data into predictable outcomes. And my latest proof of concept was the complete disruption of the luxury wedding market. My immediate focus shifted to the industry conference, where I was scheduled to speak, the perfect platform to deliver the ultimate reckoning. Disguised as a business presentation, I intended to use Veronica's failed engagement as the ultimate negative case study on the cost of prioritizing image over data integrity. Just days before the conference, Veronica, having exhausted her attempts to sabotage me, appeared at my apartment building, looking utterly defeated. Her designer clothes crumpled, her face etched with the stress of public humiliation. She was no longer the smug golden child, just a woman staring down the barrel of a public breakup and financial ruin. She walked in, bypassing niceties, and asked me, "What do you want?" "Cassidy, tell me the price to make this stop." I poured myself a glass of water, maintaining my detached professional posture, and replied, "I don't deal in emotional blackmail. Veronica, I deal in data correction. And that process is now irreversible." I told her I have everything I need: the career upgrade, the viral success, the proof that authenticity is the only sustainable strategy, and none of it cost me a cent. I considered her for a moment, then pushed the ultimate truth to the forefront, asking her why she thought Carla was so desperate to exclude me, even before the content went viral. I told Veronica that Carla knew about Darian's ongoing affair and financial risks before the engagement was even announced, and she deliberately suppressed the information to secure the Bell family's business partnership with her own firm. I explained that Carla didn't exclude me to protect Veronica's feelings. She excluded me to protect her own balance sheet, because I was the only one who would expose the entire fraudulent enterprise. Veronica stared at me, her eyes widening as the full scope of her mother's betrayal hit her. The realization broke the ice between us, replacing rivalry with shared betrayal. Veronica said, "You mean she prioritized her real estate deal over my entire marriage and my life?" I confirmed it, stating the data overwhelmingly supports that conclusion. "Veronica, you were a casualty in her corporate game." I told her the perfect life she was fighting to maintain was simply a very expensive lie engineered by our mother. At the conference, I presented my case study, the $200,000 engagement party, as a model of low ROI, high-risk content and the $12,000 transparency event as the future of sustainable, high-impact storytelling. I used the engagement data, the low organic reach, the shallow comments, the inevitable public exposure of its hollow core, as the perfect counterpoint to my viral success. I concluded my presentation with a clear statement: integrity is not a virtue. It is a measurable market asset. And any business or relationship built on the suppression of data will eventually fail. The public reckoning was swift and absolute. Carla's real estate firm faced immediate public scrutiny and lost a 9-figure contract due to the alleged cover-up of financial misconduct tied to the Bell family. Darian's professional reputation imploded, his assets frozen amid the divorce proceedings that Veronica finally initiated. I had not sought revenge with a baseball bat or a nasty rumor. I had dismantled their system using their own currency. Verifiable. Damning data. Months later, I received a call from Carla. Her voice was quiet, lacking the authoritarian edge I had known my entire life. She didn't apologize for the emotional damage. Instead, she said, "I'm calling to ask for your consulting expertise on a massive rebranding and risk management project for the firm." She paused, then added, "Your data analysis of the market's response was flawless. Cassidy, I need you to rebuild my integrity." I considered it for a moment. The cold, professional satisfaction overwhelming the need for emotional closure. I told her, "I will send you my new corporate consulting rate sheet. Consider it payment for services rendered. And then we can discuss your firm's need to convert toxic narratives into sustainable growth." My success was complete. I was not only financially independent, but held strategic leverage over the very person who had deemed me too dramatic to exist in her perfect world. I sent Carla the consulting rate sheet, a number so high it served as the final, absolute measure of my market value. The engagement was official. I was now working for the family entity that had tried to erase me. My revenge wasn't loud or emotional. It was simply the establishment of a very expensive, permanent retainer. I wasn't there to reconcile. I was there to optimize their survival. Veronica called me the day after the rate sheet was accepted. She didn't sound like the desperate woman who'd shown up at my door, but a professional who had finally processed the data. She said, "You were right about the $12,000 transparency. Cassidy, I've started my own firm focused on sustainable landscape design, and I'm publicly advocating for ethical sourcing." She admitted that the old life was simply a cost-prohibitive aesthetic, and she had finally liquidated the liability. I told her, "That's good to hear, Veronica, because authenticity scales much better than pretense." My own work flourished. My promotion to creative director was merely the beginning. I leveraged the viral success into a dedicated consulting division focused solely on brand, transparency, and data-driven narratives. A market niche I now owned entirely. I realized that the family's attempt to isolate me had not been a punishment, but a strategic gift, freeing me to build a system where my core values were not defects, but assets. The exclusion had given me the strategic liberation I needed to prove my worth outside of their flawed ecosystem. The most profound change wasn't the 7-figure salary or the corporate leverage. It was the shift in the family dynamic itself. Carla still prioritized power, but she now acknowledged that my analytical mind was the key to maintaining it, not a threat to be managed. Veronica, having stripped away her layers of false perfection, began building a life based on verifiable, genuine work. The core lesson had finally been processed, the data had spoken, and the age of superficial perfection was over. I often reflect on that conversation in my apartment. Carla's cold dismissal juxtaposed against the subsequent collapse of her perfect narrative. I realized I had not sought revenge. I had merely provided the market with honest data, and the market responded by dismantling the fraud. I have never regretted my actions because they were not driven by emotion, but by the clean, logical demand for truth. The family thought my honesty was a problem. I proved it was the most valuable asset in my arsenal. I never got the apology for the emotional hurt. But I received something far more valuable: the ultimate, verifiable proof that I was right, and the permanent strategic leverage over the system that tried to break me. The dramatic family member who was excluded for caring too much about honesty had become the person who compelled everyone else to live in reality. I stand here now, not as the black sheep, but as the architect of my own truth. A truth that proved infinitely more profitable and powerful than any facade they could have constructed. Thank you for following the story of how I converted my family's rejection into a corporate ROI case study. If you have ever been the excluded one who found strength and success through your own unwavering authenticity, leave your story and your own personal victory metrics in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more strategic storytelling and analysis.